Welcome to the Q&A we're about to host here. I'm Richard Herskowitz. I'm the Artistic and Executive Director of the Ashland Independent Film Festival. You just saw the film Public Trust, and I'm thrilled that we have here a number of the filmmakers and participants in the film. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, starting with you, David.
Hey, my name is David Byars. I'm the director of the film. Super excited to be back at AIFF, and thank you, Richard, for having us.
Jeremy.
I'm Jeremy Rubingh. I produced the film with David, and yeah, it's an honor to be here, and thanks for making space for us.
Bernadette.
Bernadette Demientieff. My name is Bernadette Demientieff. I'm from Fort Yukon, Alaska, which is 8 miles above the Arctic Circle. And I am the executive director for the Gwich'in Steering Committee, which was founded in 1988. Thank you for having me.
Hal.
My name is Hal Herring. I'm a freelance writer and contributing editor at Field and Stream. I've been covering conservation and environment around the United States for about 25 years. And that's about it. I'm based near Great Falls, Montana, Augusta, Montana.
And now the person with the perfect name, Land Herring.
Tawney.
Sorry.
Please do not connect me to Hal Herring, at least that way. He's not my dad. My name is Tawney, and I'm the president and CEO of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. We're based here in Missoula, Montana, but we have chapters in 45 states, 2 Canadian provinces, and 1 territory. And we make sure you have access to public lands and waters, and then the fish and wildlife habitat when you get there.
Thank you, Lan. So let's start by just talking about some of the origins of the project. David, I understand that really this awareness of public lands and their importance came to you somewhat late in your life. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I grew up in Georgia, and as you may or may not know, we don't have the vast swaths of federal public lands in Georgia that we do out west. I moved out to Colorado a long time ago and was kind of astounded by the fact that I had access to all this land and I could just go out and camp on BLM land and pop over to Utah and explore the Red Rocks Desert without having to ask any permission or sneak onto the land. And so that was kind of my introduction to public lands. And then I kind of became cognizant of the conflict surrounding public lands when I made the film No Man's Land in 2017, which played at AIFF. And, that was something that really fascinated me. And so it was really important to me to actually kind of delve into that further. And that's kind of how this film came about, particularly when I met Jeremy, who has forgotten more about public lands than I'll ever know. So it's been kind of a journey for me, and I hope that's reflected in the film in terms of coming to understand what public lands are and kind of internalizing that.
So David, we met a couple of years ago when you came to Ashland with your film No Man's Land, made in 2017 about the 2016 military occupation by the Bundys of the Malheur Wildlife Refuge, which is actually not too far from Ashland. Can you talk about that and how that sort of led to this particular film?
Sure. So it was during the deep dive on that in terms of, talking to Hal and also doing my own research, where I started to understand that, the Bundys were just kind of the noisiest part of the public lands conflict. And they weren't super representative of the whole in terms of how they were going about doing it. And there was a much larger and kind of more sinister and insidious force out there that was, actively trying to rob us of our public lands through various means. And it was kind of difficult to wrap your head around because first of all, the public lands are such a huge topic and also a physically large object, but also the way that they were trying to do this is, by, various softer means and lawsuits and in kind of political machinations and whatnot. So that was something that really fascinated me. And then that kind of just opened up this whole world to me. And it was definitely going to be a challenge to make a film to kind of wrap my head around that. And that's honestly, when Jeremy came on and was able to like kind of lend his knowledge to the topic and to pitching this film to try to get funding to make it.
Let's hear about from Jeremy. How did you get involved in this film? How did you connect with David?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been a big fan of Telluride mountain film for a long time, and I had seen No Man's Land there, and David and I had an opportunity to kind of talk about it, and sort of his desire to dig deeper on the subject of public lands. There's only so much you can do in a film, and he and I both felt like there were things that had to be omitted for that film to be the amazing story it was, and things that kind of needed to be addressed and a deeper dive on this whole topic. And so kind of a natural good friendship was born out of that, and we went back and forth on that. And I'd been working in conservation for quite some time and had worked with Tawney and other folks on some national issues. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of a perfect coming together. One thing I'd say, usually right before we kick these things off, we do like to kind of, even though we're doing this virtually, acknowledge the land and the native lands in the place where this is happening. And so, though we can't be there in Ashland, we do want to, recognize and acknowledge the difficult history of these places and the fact that these are our native lands. And, I think we want to acknowledge and include in this part of Oregon, the Modoc and the Takelma, the Shasta, the Athabascans, and all of those who I may have failed to mention, and consider the Rogue Valley their traditional lands. So I want to make sure we include them, as well as acknowledge tribal communities that were displaced and consider this part of Oregon home. So,
so yeah. Hal, I remember you, Hal, from No Man's Land. So you had worked with David before. How did you get involved in this project?
Well, it was through No Man's Land that they ended up contacting me to kind of be whatever I am in this movie. But I had been up at the Malheur during the Bundy occupation, and I had written some about that, and David and them had read that essay. That was at High Country News in 2016, I think. And I was fascinated by the Bundy phenomenon, because I had been involved in writing about public lands issues for over 20 years. And now everybody was talking about public lands on television. And with the exception of, say, Oregon Public Broadcasting did an incredible job on reporting all that stuff. But a lot of the news I was getting it was pretty clear that people didn't know much about what a national forest was or why we had it.
Yeah. So let me just switch the view here. Yes. So I remember from the film that, again, Hal was a voice in the film, but he has a much more prominent role in this, David. And in a way, I saw that you didn't have to have a voice of God narrator, a kind of a traditional style, because you had Hal. Could you say something about that? How you drew on him?
Well, I mean, you just look at Hal. He's super handsome. It works really well on camera.
Godlike.
Yeah, godlike. So it's kind of a personal. It's a personal stylistic thing that I don't really like to have narrators in the film, because I don't like to insert the narrator's voice into the film, even though we are the ones crafting it. But we were, given that this is such a big topic, we had first identified the geographies and the conflicts that we wanted to talk about, then the kind of historical beats we wanted to talk about, and then we needed to kind of figure out a way to tie this all together. And Hal's an interesting dude, and he's kind of been steeped in this in a kind of a macro kind of philosophical level for a long time. So we, that was he was kind of an obvious choice to, then bring us through it. And he's been a great sport about it and letting us kind of like cart him and poke him and prod him and put him on camera all the time in order to do this. And I think that's kind of what Hal's role was to really kind of connect all these different things and then let these places and people speak for themselves.
Before we get to Bernadette and land, I just want to ask you, I mean, what a vast topic this is, and you had to condense it to 96 minutes. How did you, narrow down these 3 areas to focus on?
Well, a lot of that was Jeremy. He kind of had his finger on the pulse of what the conflicts were. But then once we focused on those conflicts, a lot of this came out in the edit. So I have to give a lot of credit to our editor, Lyman Smith, who is super steady hand and like an incredible intellectual force in terms of distilling this down into a way that made sense in 96 minutes, which is such a limited format for such a huge topic.
Mm-hmm. So just looking at one of these areas, the Arctic National Refuge, Bernadette, maybe if you just say about how you became involved and how you were drawn into this project.
So I don't know how I was drawn into it. As Gwich'in people, we are raised to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge coastal plain. Mm-hmm. Our people have had a spiritual and cultural connection to the porcupine caribou herd for over 40,000 years. And this is where they calve. This is their calving grounds, their nursery and calving grounds. And our elders, this has been passed down from generation to generation, that we are to keep this place protected for all time. And so as Gwich'in people, we're just raised, this is not a job for us. We're not environmentalists and we're not activists. We're simply trying to protect our way of life, our food security, our identity, and our homelands. So we didn't go looking for no fight. It kind of came to our front door.
Mm-hmm. I felt that each of the 3 sections could have been a film on its own, that there was really each fascinating stories and important ones. And so you've seen the film, Bernadette. Are you satisfied with the representation? Do you feel like the film is going to help the cause?
Actually, I do. I really appreciate the way that they came and they took the time to get to know us, because we do have people that just pop in and pop out, get what they need. I still have relationships with them. They call and check on how our lives are, how we're doing, what's going on with the fight, and that means a lot. I think that in this day and age, especially right now with this pandemic that's going on, people should understand this is it. This is why we fight so hard. This is it. Like, look around you. This is why we fight so hard for the protection of our lands. Our lands, our waters, and our animals, that's our survival when it comes down to it. Right now, I'm not worried because I know I can go out on the land and I can survive. But that not everybody can do that, and that's worrisome. So it's just, as Indigenous people, we always, and as you can see, there's a lot of non-Indigenous people that stand with us, that understand that this is not just about the protection of these sacred places, but it's about survival. And we're going to continue to stand united against anyone who seeks to destroy the calving grounds.
I feel that one of the connections to the coronavirus and the pandemic we're in right now is just the impact of the demonization of the federal government that has happened, and that is one of the major stories in your film. You show how what used to be a common conservationist politics, both Republicans and Democrats shared, got channeled into this hatred for the federal government, this fury that has paralyzed government. And we see government being paralyzed right now in its response to the coronavirus. And Hal, that's something that you've been writing about for quite some time, correct?
It is. And I came at it from a point of view of kind of a deep skeptic of government power, But the fact is if you're going to agree to have a government, if you're going to consent to be governed, that government would do things like protect public lands. It would have a very functioning Clean Water Act. It would do the things that the individuals in the states cannot do alone. And so I've had a kind of a transmogrification of my own thinking in this, due to my love of land and water and fish and wildlife and the way they fit in with not just quality of life, but like Bernadette said, with our survival, you know? And so my own journey and I don't embrace government power still, I'm a skeptic. But if we're gonna have a government, it would do things like protect watersheds, and that's what the national forests do. You know, it's been fascinating, I gotta tell you, this whole journey.
Any of the rest you want to add to that or comment about the demonization of government and I guess the deflection from discussing corporate responsibility?
Yeah.
Let Land jump in there, Dave. Let Land field this one.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess I was going to maybe pivot like on this coronavirus too. I think we're seeing the, you know, demonization, and you just saw why Hal is the spokesperson. He's a gigantic word that I can't even say again. So thank you for that, Hal. But I think one of the things that's going on with this coronavirus is people are, and I think Bernadette kind of touched on this a little bit, is people are understanding like what public lands and public waters do for us all. And whether that's food security, whether that's water security, or just a peace of mind. You know, I think if you're only able to walk around your block right now, that breeze on your neck, that sun on your face, or, you know, I mean, here in Montana, we've been able to go out in the river, we've been go out in the woods and have a fire, chase turkeys around. Like the solace that's providing all of us right now, I think cannot be underscored. And so I think while there's some demonization going on about the federal government, and, you know, these protests, you know, where some of these people are even getting coronavirus at the protests when they're saying, you know, they don't want the regulations. I think one of the benefits of this whole thing and the silver lining is that people are understanding what public water and public lands do for people on a day-to-day basis.
So Len, you are involved in the Boundary Waters fight right now. And so tell us a little bit about your experience with the film.
Yeah, so I think I was lucky to be part of like the beginning of this. Even I think before David and Jeremy were involved, we had a meeting at our office with Patagonia folks and started to talk about the film. And the way that it kind of matured, and I think David described that really well, is Jeremy kind of having a, you know, a pulse on kind of the issues at, you know, that hand. And, you know, we've been working on, you know, stuff with up on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge as well. And then the Boundary Waters is, you know, this special, special place for our chapter in Minnesota. It's the most visited wilderness in the country. It's got some of the cleanest water in the country. It's been recognized as an important place since Theodore Roosevelt first started protections back in the early 1900s. And, you know, there's a proposed mine that's just a quarter mile south, and all this water flows north. And so no matter what happens with the copper sulfide mine, it leaches at some point. And so this place is at huge risk. And, you know, to us, this is not about politics. This is, you know, this is about a special place that we need to protect for future generations. And so I'm super, you know, excited that was involved in the film. I think the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge as well. And then just the idea of, you know, national monuments in general. And you think about the Cascade Siskiyou that's just right there in Oregon, established in 2000. It was established to be, you know, there for future generations because of the ecology that's there, because of the geology that's there. And that's a treasure that all of us, you know, have a piece of. And I think, you know, I've been excited to be a part of the film. These are all good folks to work with, and look forward to more.
Thank you, Len. I want to hear just more. Where's the film going from here? I understand that the film was produced with Patagonia Films, and that there's going to be a campaign coming out of it. Can you say something about this, Jeremy? Maybe you can tell us.
Yeah, I think Dave will probably chime in here too. But you know, you saw at the end of the film there's this text defend to 71333. Super important. It's a great way to stay connected to these issue areas like the Boundary Waters, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, developments with Bears Ears in Utah, but also in your own local area. Getting involved with this will help connect you with local groups working on big, important conservation issues. It'll also connect people with the election that's coming up and how to make sure that they're getting out and voting for their public lands. So it's a really good opportunity to not only stay connected to the film, but the issues in your own backyard. And we hope it's also a great tool to figure out what your public lands are wherever you may be. You know, there are great opportunities, whether you're in Georgia or Ohio or wherever. There's opportunities to go out and hunt and fish your public lands, or even just to enjoy, you know, a land and water conservation fund site that's a small park near you. So that's part of it. You know, I think there's a lot of up in the air right now, not knowing kind of how large gatherings will happen around film in the next few months, but we are hopeful that we'll get this on a good online platform for everybody to see across the country. Dave, what would you add to that?
Yeah, so obviously we can't do our festivals, and we had a bunch of grassroots screenings and theatrical planned as well. That's on hold indefinitely, but in lieu of that, we're working on a strategy to get this out in like a big way that's easily accessible to everyone and or free. And so that's kind of what we should be on the lookout if you want to share this film. And if you want to keep up to date on all those announcements, you can follow us, Public Trust, on Instagram. And that's a good way for everyone to kind of keep abreast of, that's where all of our announcements are going to come out.
That's public_trust. It's pretty easy to find on Instagram.
Okay. Want to thank you all for coming. It's a beautiful film. I think you're educating people. You're going to activate them. It's everything we look for in an independent film in our festival. And I'm grateful to you all for participating and joining us.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
to see your faces, everyone.
Yeah, great seeing
Thanks
everybody.
very much.
Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.